Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano, and I'm going to tell you how I achieved my goal physique when I was 17, or at least my goal physique at that time, within 1 year of training, and actually 11 months. And I achieved it by a ketogenic diet and, of course, learning how to bodybuilding train properly. But this video is going to tell you everything about my experience with that, and now down the line, 7-8 years later, I've learned a lot more, and that's the whole premise of my channel. But I'm going to tell you everything about that approach that I used and essentially the main experience I had with that, my background, essentially how I got into this. It's a little bit about myself, but also some useful stuff that you can probably take away for yourself. Alright, so this is my video on my history with the ketogenic diet and kind of my history with bodybuilding and stuff as a whole as a byproduct of it being focused on the keto stuff. But essentially, this is how I got into all the stuff I'm doing now, like the classic bodybuilding, nutrition, the collaborations with Golden Era Bookworm, the prolonged fasting stuff, the intermittent fasting stuff, the keto coaching, these keto programs I'm putting out. And essentially, me trying to put out a lot of information on this stuff. Although there's a lot of other stuff that I do now, the keto stuff was the initial thrust of this YouTube page. And I do the ketogenic diet for at least half of the year, every year for the past, 7-8 years. But it's probably around 8 now. But realistically, I'm doing it 90% of the year now. Some of those early years, it was just the bare minimum of half the year. So I'm going to give you like a bit of a story here as well to supplement this with, to make it like a fun narrative, history, background of what made me do this in the first place, right? So that's kind of my own personal story time at the same time. But for the people who just wanted to come here to learn, like, oh, what did this guy do, right? Great thumbnail and video title, right? Very catchy, okay? Here's the answer for you. The answer for you is I did the ketogenic diet when I was like probably 15, 16 for the first time. Did it for a couple months, did it kind of wrong, but I still ended up like gaining a bit of muscle and losing a bit of fat. So that worked out kind of well. Next year, I, still in and out of the gym, but when I was 16, I basically had made a commitment like in October 2013, so I was 16 or so at the time, but basically I had made a commitment that, I'm going to work out every single day for like the next 8-9 months until I'm like at the physique I want. And that's essentially what I did. But there were varying periods of that where I was in the keto state and burning fat. There were various periods where I was building muscle at the same time. And then over the years I built up, and I also experimented with other dieting types. Like I did some very heavy, dirty bulks in the, few months that I wasn't on keto sometimes. And I learned my lesson from that, right? Because you're younger at the time, you're trying new bodybuilding techniques, especially when you're in it for a year or so. So for the people who just came here because they want to know the answer, that's the answer, okay? I'm going to give my cooler background story here, my more personal background story now, but essentially that is the gist of it. I had, for the 11-month transformation, October 2013, I was, had a decent amount of experience in the gym, but I thought this is the year that I'm like, fuck it, I'm going in, and I'm working out every single day. I don't care if I have to work out for 20 minutes. I'm going to work out every single day. And I did. I worked out every single day, 7 days a week, sometimes even twice, from October 1st, 2013 until like probably July something. I don't remember the stop date, but it's on my Instagram. You can roll back my Instagram and figure out the exact picture where I posted about this, because it took me 11 months. I basically did a keto cut before October, and then I did a bulk with carbs, right? And then I did a keto cut for like the next 6 or 7 months of that time frame, probably 7 months or so. And I was still training every single day and also playing soccer. So some days I would have like, a training session and then a soccer game, right? And it worked out very well. I actually played very well. And I happened to nail like my carb manipulation strategies that I talk about now, like carb backloading, targeted ketogenic diets, all those things. I just happened to get lucky with stumbling upon the right information. But most people don't do that. And I also had a lot of this element of perseverance, I guess, because I didn't really care how hard it was. When I was trying to do like the fat loss part of it, because that's kind of how I got into it. I wanted to be leaner for sports. When I got into that part, I just looked up like most effective fat loss diet, and I didn't really care how hard it was. And I eventually thought, okay, this keto stuff, it's going to be really hard, but I don't care. If it's supposed to be the best, I'll do it. Because the limited information I was looking at, I was kind of just most sold on keto, coincidentally, or perhaps prophetically. But this is the, essentially the gist of what the message is here. But I'm going to go into my personal story now, because this is what I want to tell the people who are truly interested in following my page because of what I have to say and all that stuff, all the stuff I'm interested in, because you're probably interested in it too. So go back in time to like, I'm 14, 15, 16, right? So when I was younger, a lot of people, they're either you're the skinny type or you're the fat type, or, you're a bit underweight or you're a bit overweight, or you're just maybe a bit of both, right? But for most people, it's like, you're too skinny, you're too chubby. That's what it is. And I happen to be more the skinny type. So I'll have some pictures up here, like 14, 15, 16, what I looked like at each of those ages. And I was more so the skinny type. That's just what I was. I played a lot of sports when I was younger. I was pretty athletic, and I did lots of soccer, for sure, lots of endurance type sports. I also did volleyball and a bit of football when I was younger, even some basketball, but I was pretty shit at that. But the other ones I was good. And essentially, when I got into high school, the only sport I really stuck with on a high level was soccer. And so around 14, 15, 16, I was always used to being the skinny guy, etc. And I actually put up like some old transformation video on all the stuff I'm saying here. It's probably pretty cringy, whatever, but it's all documentation and truth of what I did to initially get into this. So essentially, you can watch that too after if you want to see some nostalgia, but also slight cringe. But I'm leaving it up there because it's a video I remember making. I was like, I felt pretty intensely about it. So I'm gonna try to give you just the most important details. I'm 15, 16, I'm a skinny guy, athletic type guy, played a lot of sports, and I wasn't into the training thing. A lot of like younger people are kind of like that. If they do a sport and they're kind of good at it, they're like, training sucks, right? And when I was like 15, I got into like for the first time, like a very competitive soccer team. And I really wanted to be good. And I'm actually close friends with a lot of people from that team still nowadays. Great, very important character building part of my life for me. But essentially, I really wanted to perform well. And I was a forward, I was an attacking player, so scoring goals and like all the stuff that you did right or wrong was very apparent if you messed up or not. So I even wanted to micromanage that. I was like, hey, I want to get leaner. if you're lighter or if you're stronger in the legs, you can run faster, all those different types of things. And I was very obsessive. That's the way I am with a lot of training and whatnot. So essentially, I had gotten in a very inconsistent rhythm in the gym, right? I took a fitness class when I was like 14 and 15, or maybe 15 and 16, I think I was. And when I started playing for my soccer team at 15, we started doing these conditioning trainings where every week we would do like a lot of plyometric and, other strength-based activities in addition to training like a regular, team, right? Like strategic and tactical stuff. But we're training full on, like, with resistance in some way or another, even at 15, and trying to get better. And I was still using a lot of like the, bro science-y type of fitness knowledge at that time. All right, it was like 2012. And essentially, I was using like the whole, finish the thing, then have a shake or whatever, right? That type of stuff. And, it worked out well. And I happened to stumble upon a lot of other beneficial information and research to go down my journey. But here's the thing. So I take a fitness class, and I also started working out a lot more with my cousin Felice. So I'll throw up his Instagram and YouTube here probably as well, because realistically, training with my cousin Felice really helped me stay consistent over the years. And like, we still train all the time now today. You might have even seen him on my Instagram, etc. But, you know, training with my cousin, especially because he was in it for like a year longer than I was, it was almost like, you know, I'm in a class learning this, but I also have a very close friend who I can kind of like pick things out of his brain for, and also, you know, a close friend who's going through the same types of, you know, not struggles, but like still stuff that you don't know. Maybe they don't know some of it, but maybe some areas he'll teach me something that I didn't know, and then other times it's like we're going through the same problems because we're just starting this, but you have a friend who has a bit more experience than you. So that was very helpful for me. And if you're watching, Felice, hey, kudos. You know, thanks for all the help with the 20-pound dumbbells back in the day. But essentially, yeah, very interesting stories behind Felice's origins too at the gym, which you might find interesting if he starts posting more YouTube videos, which I'm going to throw out as a chirp there. But essentially, at that point, I was training relatively inconsistently in the gym. Generally only with my soccer team, a couple times a week, or at this fitness class once every day essentially, but the activities would vary. And I had gotten into, so this is around, you know, I've shown my pictures at this point of like 14, 15, 16. And when I was in that year of like 2011, 2012, where I was very inconsistent with the gym or just getting started here and there or training a little bit at home, you know, I remember I was on vacation one year with my cousin Felice. Our families went down to Florida almost every summer. And I remember we were in the pool at this place in Clearwater, Florida, and he's telling me about some bodybuilder who died at the time. And this was like August 2011. So the bodybuilder who died was a guy named Aziz, right? That was his name. And, you know, you probably heard about him if you're interested in any of the fitness stuff and you're my age or older. But he was like a big icon at the time of this fitness stuff. So that was like the real first eye-opening experience for me, because I was like, holy shit, like a guy who looks like me in just a few years could get his goal physique, like if it just takes enough time, right? And naturally, because he died at a younger age, you know, there was obviously the thought of like, yeah, he's probably using like steroids and stuff. And that's not a disrespect in any way, because it was a big part of my motivation to see like the progress of this guy, for example. And, you know, then you kind of go down this rabbit hole where you're like, let's see other people who have done this, right? And you see all these people who have, you know, grown from the skinny guy type of beginning or like the fat type of beginning, right? And I realized that this stuff is possible. Like, people can change dramatically. People can do these, you know, diet approaches and go from like overweight to like shredded and ripped and yoked and, you know, like the muscle and the leanness. Or people can go from the opposite end, the skinny end, to do that. So I'm going down this rabbit hole of bodybuilding knowledge months down the line, because at first I was kind of like, you know, vaguely interested, but just eye-opened. And I kind of was like, hey, there's this bulking and cutting thing. I'm going to have to do one. And as the skinny guy at that point, I was like, hey, the easiest thing is probably to start off by getting leaner, because I'm already a pretty skinny guy. I'll look better right now, and then I can just bulk and cut every, you know, as the time goes on. So that's what I did, and that worked out kind of okay for me, but I kind of ended up doing like a little bit of like a recomp, like a build muscle and burn fat, especially because I was a younger guy. There's like that noob gains element. But so in 2011 at some point, I remember I did like a probably 3-month or so keto diet, and I definitely like did things wrong at certain points, but I surprisingly had a good amount of it down in a solid way, in the correct way. Like, example, I had initially looked up like most effective fat burn diet or best fat loss diet or something. And my mindset going in, once I kind of got into this, like, you know, bodybuilding thing and realizing this is possible, is like, okay, I don't care what's the hardest thing. If this is possible, like, I just want to do the best approach, right? Make these results come quicker so that I'll look good when I'm 20 opposed to like 25, right? So essentially, I just wanted the best results, and I didn't care if something was hard. Little did I know that keto would feel ridiculously easy after I got past the first few weeks. But initially, I just was like, okay, I don't care. I'm just going to do this stuff. I don't care if it's hard. I'll do it every single day. So I remember I started off doing this the keto stuff because I was kind of the most sold on that based on what I was just looking at the time. And I also saw like these bodybuilding.com reviews where people are talking about these other wacky approaches and transformation stories. And then I also saw that video of that Ziz guy, of Ziz, if you don't, aren't familiar with him. And he was like nonchalantly talking about like the keto stuff. And I remember when Felice showed me him, like, the sometime prior to that, I was like, oh shit, like this guy did it too, right? And after like all these like funky bodybuilding.com transformation stories, I was like pretty sold on it. I was like, hey, I'm gonna try this. And it also happened like probably have the highest results for like really adamant testimonies when you type in most effective fat loss diet, right? Especially if you're not caring about how easy. If you don't type in easy in there, like, it feels more believable. So that was my mindset at the time about it. And I had done it for a couple months, probably like 2011, like maybe October, November, December area. And I did that for a couple months, and I remember showing up to high school with like broccoli and like chicken breast and like these little like egg sandwiches with like low carb bread. That's what I was doing basically. So, I remember having like this strict carb requirement that I gave myself, like a sort of like 30 grams total per day or something, except for green vegetables essentially. So I was probably like most of the time I was in ketosis because I wouldn't have, bread every single day or a tablespoon of oats. Those were basically the only like real carbs I would eat. Would be like some days I'd have a tablespoon of oats, some days I'd have, low carb bread and an egg sandwich. And realistically, if I'm having like some broccoli and chicken next to it, it's like the glycemic response is going to be, mitigated and the insulin is going to be blunted. So there were little pitfalls that kind of saved me a little bit to be in a better level of ketosis than I should have been most of the time. But even if I was kicking myself out of ketosis from time to time, I still noticed the benefits of the diet. And besides the fact that there would be days where I felt great and there'd be days where I felt like shit just because I probably was doing things wrong and also not really, watching other things like electrolytes, etc., or having fattier foods or picking protein sources that are naturally fattier. They have a slower insulin response, all these other things that would basically increase satiety and energy levels. I was doing the most part right, essentially, but I just happened to, get some things wrong because I was like a 15, 16-year-old. And it's like that analogy. There's a great analogy as far as people with online coaching because it's the Kung Fu analogy. It's like, when you're first starting to do something, if you're really adamant, like you can learn some stuff, but for the most part, it's like you're just practicing Kung Fu on your lawn and like you're just trying to teach yourself Kung Fu. Like you look like if people knew how to do keto and they were talking to me, like I would look like an idiot. You know what I'm saying? But that's the nature of these things. You start off, you don't do everything right, especially if you don't have that guidance. So that's kind of why that's why I believe I resonate with a lot of people watching my page, because you can mess up in a lot of ways if you don't do enough research. But that's what I was doing. I was doing more research and kind of getting into this, and I just treated it like a very, very low carb diet. And I'd essentially kick myself out of ketosis here and there. What are you going to do? But going into that next summer, I had, after like the winter, right? So that when I finished that keto diet, I remember I was in like a fitness class in like 10th grade. And I remember my teacher telling me like, hey, like you look like you've gained muscle and like you're bigger than the beginning of the class. Like you've actually made a lot of good progress. And I remember her telling me that, but normally I would have been kind of like, my bullshit detectors would have went off and I would have been like, yeah, okay, thanks, right? Like positive reinforcement though, like thank you. But essentially I really did notice the results. I remember my shitty ass Hollister shirt would fit a little tighter on this chest and arms. And I believed her. I was like, thank you. Like, I thought I noticed that myself, right? Because she basically said, like, you're looking more muscular, but you're also you're leaner. Like, I can see your veins and stuff, right? I don't remember exactly how she said it, but she basically said it in a non-like predatorial way of like, you are looking like much better, because I was probably the skinniest guy in that class at that point. And it's a very big difference as a result of noob gains, but combined with like, keto, I was leaning out and kind of gaining some muscle. Especially because in that fitness class, she was a very good teacher. We pushed the limit all the time. But I didn't really train too much after that. I kind of was like inconsistent. And going into the next year, you can see that like this picture of me at the beach, like on vacation the following year, I was like relatively lean for my size and like not too much muscle, but like for a 15, 16-year-old, it's pretty good. And this is because I stopped doing the keto stuff, but I tried to build more muscle, but I kind of didn't really take it seriously. I would train like every now and then. Then I'm on the soccer team again, like that 2012 year, and I wanted to go into the next year like very good. As I said, like I just wanted to really perform well, and I kind of tried to, double down on this fitness class I was doing and stuff. And I thought, you know what, if I can be faster, I can be leaner, I can be a better player, all those things. And October 2013 comes around, and I remember that first day, I just, for some reason, was like, fuck it, I'm training every single day, and I'm making the goal to learn something new every single day. I'm going to look something up and ask a question to myself and answer it, and spend at least 20 minutes researching, and it would often go way longer. And this is in school and stuff too. This is the following year. So coming off of that picture where I'm on the beach and looking my first year of training relatively seriously is done. So I'm going to this one, I'm going to train every single day and be consistent. And then as soon as I bulk up to a point where I think I got some good muscle, I'm going to just cut. I don't care how long it takes. I'll do keto, right? So I'd only had 3 months of keto dieting experience at this point, but I was like, all right, I did the bulk. So there's plenty I could talk about that, because I would take these little progress pictures every day just to make sure, and I keep track of my weight. I have other videos on how you need to keep a journal to see these things. Even if you don't like the way the pictures are, you just have to keep track of measurements. And I remember, I think the peak of my bulk that year, I got to 180 something, 187, 188 maybe even 183, I don't know. But I remember I cut down to 155 or maybe even a little bit less than that. And I remember my MyFitnessPal, it dropped the logs of that when they updated it one year. But 155 area, maybe even 152 or something. And I got really shredded at that point. That was the first time I got really, really ripped. And that was the point where I realized wow, even if you're not a big muscular guy, you can look sick if you just get diced. And that was kind of more where I started doubling down on the keto knowledge. I really got into the keto knowledge at that point because I had just done it for 7 months and obviously gotten better as each month went by, right? Because I finished the bulk around maybe February or so, and then it was February, March area, and maybe even February, and I just did the cut for up until August or something. And I wasn't counting calories at first, but I got very aggressive with that towards the end and kind of learned I would keep track of things very meticulously. So I would see, I'm losing more when I have this balance of ratio of fat and protein, etc. And then I'd look that up and try to verify or disprove what I believed, etc. And this process went on until the point where I got it was just before my 18th birthday, July, I was just shredded. And I was 17 at that point. I was 17 and I had even though it wasn't my goal physique, it was this is, phase one of looking good. This is my dream physique, but not as big, right? Because I had built up the key components with these, key training ideas that I had learned as time went on, as every single day compounding, right? Learning more, correcting areas that I would mess up. And nowadays it's just built on and I'm trying to put this stuff out. But there was lots of different things I had learned and done wrong and done right. And this was just the first year where I had truly taken it seriously, because I did it the year before, but I only did a couple months. And after that point, every year I would do this. I would do keto for at least 6 months. I would bulk and then cut. That was my approach for the next year, right? Because actually that year I kind of coasted out some cyclical ketogenic stuff. And I ended up going in pretty well in condition into the end of the year. But then I started experimenting more with the carb bulks or cyclical carb bulks. And some years, one year I did some really dirty bulking and other things like this and experimented with these other techniques, so I know that they are shit. I know that if it's your macros and all these other things, they can work, but they're terrible and they feel so arduous when you're going to bed and you're starving, you're gnawing at your ankle and shit like that, So essentially that was the point where I got down the line. I had enough experience with other things, and I still was doing at least half the year in ketosis, where I doubled down on it. I was like, hey, I'm just gonna do it longer. I'm just gonna do it. I'm lean where I want to be now. Now I'm just gonna stick with it. I'm just going to do keto for lifestyle. I'm gonna do keto for not caring about leanness. I'm just gonna try to bulk, build muscle with it. Those types of things down the line. And this was all before I was even 20. And as things went on, I learned more, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's the gist of this video. So the first year I got my dream physique, as far as a teenage version of myself could dream for. And I did it within 11 months because I had a carefully placed program set up. I had a program set up where essentially I had the timeline set up. I gave myself more time to cut than I would have needed, and I doubled down in keeping the calories in check at the same time. I trained all this time. I was also playing high-level soccer at this time, and my performance was exploding. This was the craziest part because my performance was doing so well. I got better every year. And when we were, every year that I played, so from 14, 15 to 18 or so, 18 or 19 or so, essentially every year we moved up a league and I would perform better. When we were in the hardest league, I did my best. And I would do these carb backloading techniques. I would do these targeted keto techniques on training sessions, or I'd go into certain games just fully ketogenic. And I did these things at 17. I did these things at 18 as well. And I was lucky that I happened to find the right research at the time because I didn't have to put up with as much, mistake. But the next following years, I'd try these things outside of a competitive area, and I would notice hey, what's going wrong? I don't feel as good as I did the times before. And then little did I realize that, hey, when I was 17, I actually had this right from the beginning. And I, if I'm going to go in fully ketogenically, I have to do it like this. Or if I'm going to go in with some carb loading, I have to do it like this. So there was a lot of luck involved with that. But I happened to do things well. And I had the balance of, playing games on keto, playing high-level soccer with carb backloading. All these are the things that are on my page. And that, again, put me further down the rabbit hole. So, hopefully this video was entertaining if you stuck through to this point. Hey, my camera cut off during that last clip. If you're interested in hiring me as your keto coach, go to my website, romanoketo.com. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've done it every right way and every wrong way. And if you've stuck around to the end of this video, I hope you read that little interesting bit I threw a couple minutes back, right? You know what I mean, okay? So, if you did, make sure you send me the message that you've seen it, and make sure you reference it explicitly, because that could play out well down the line. Besides that, thank you again for watching. Share this video and let me know in the comments. What I'm curious about today is, how do you watch these videos? Do you, render them and then listen to them in the car type of thing? Do you listen to them on a commute? What's your thing? Okay, I want to know how you guys are consuming these videos, and if you're a fan of the long form content. I wanted to get a little bit more personal with this one, so I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about me and the experience I've had with all this keto stuff, especially in the bodybuilding connection with that. But thank you again. Like, subscribe, and ask me your questions in the comments. Anthony Romano, peace.